Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell, and in this video, I'm going to continue on with my presentation of a manuscript that I am working on the Parmenides. For those of you who did not see the previous video, I do encourage you to watch that. What I'm going to be doing today is continuing on with a chapter on the second hypothesis. And so the previous video was the first half of this chapter on the second hypothesis. It is very heavy in metaphysics. I appreciate those of you who watched the other one straight through. It was very difficult, I think, to get through it all in one sitting. I don't know how long it took you to get through it. I'd be curious to know, so you can let me know in the comments. This video as well is going to be rather heavy in metaphysics. The videos after this will not be so heavy in metaphysics. So it's really just the second hypothesis that has us going so deeply into metaphysics, going into Proclus. There's a lot of Proclus here, as there was with the previous video. So I thank those of you who are working through this. That said, I will now jump into the text, and as I have been doing, I'm going to read straight through because I want to know if what I wrote is sufficient commentary. I'm not going to add any commentary in addition to what is written on the page. So please let me know in the comments your feedback if you find the explanation is sufficient. Is it clear? Is there anything that would make it clear for you? That would be very helpful to me. So I would really appreciate you putting that in the comments section below. And that said, I will jump now into the text. Okay, so let's get back into the text. So this video is going to pick up from the first intellectual triad. And what we're going to see here is that Proclus assigned names of gods to the three in this triad. And it starts here with the god Kronos at the top of the intellectual triad. From the demonstration of having figure, Parmenides goes on to in itself and in another. In the first hypothesis, Parmenides had to show that the one is neither in itself nor in another. Now he is going to show that it is both in itself and in another. This flows quite naturally from the demonstration of having figure. Proclus connects this discussion to the intellectual realm. On Parmenides' treatment of this section of the dialogue, Proclus writes, "Let us survey what he says concerning the Father of the intellectual gods, and the undefiled power which is co-arranged with him. For after the threefold figure and the order of the gods which perfects all things, that which is in itself and in another becomes apparent." Turning now to the dialogue, let's look at how Parmenides introduces this leg of the discussion. Will it therefore, being such, subsist in itself and in another? By including the words being such, Parmenides is making it clear that subsisting in itself and in another follows from the previous discussion about figure. Having figure requires the second hypothesis 1 to be someplace. We are still far from the physical realms, however. Instead, we are challenged to extend our notion of terms such as figure and place to include energies and powers beyond the physical. Every real being has its own proper order and rank within the metaphysical hierarchy. In contrast, the first hypothesis 1 does not participate in figure. As a result, it has no location or relation to anything else. It is neither in itself nor in another. Parmenides begins by pointing out that each of the parts is in the whole, nor is any one external to the whole. We are talking about things that have shape, and parts that make up a whole. The parts, by definition, are parts of the whole, and collectively they form the whole. In this sense, they are in the whole. There are no additional parts beyond those needed to form the whole. An additional part would not, by definition, be a part of this whole. This is what Parmenides means when he states that none of the parts are external to the whole. He then adds, but all the parts are comprehended by the whole. Were any parts not included, the whole would be incomplete. It would not be a whole. Parmenides connects these general statements now to the one. But the one is all the parts of itself, and is neither more nor less than all. Is not the one, therefore, a whole? Parmenides can now put all of this together. The parts are in the whole, and the parts collectively are one. The one is therefore a whole with parts all comprehended by the whole. We can therefore say that the parts are comprehended by the one. However, we also stated that the parts collectively are one. Therefore, the one is both the whole and its parts. As such, it is comprehended by itself. From this reasoning, Parmenides is able to conclude that the one is in itself. If, therefore, all the parts are in the whole, and all the parts are one, and the one is a whole, but all the parts are comprehended by the whole, hence the one will be comprehended by the one, and so the one will be in itself. Parmenides is now halfway through this current task of showing that the one is both in itself and in another. He has shown that the one is in itself. Now he has to show that it is in another. After getting Aristotle's agreement that the one is in itself, Parmenides adds, but again, the whole is not in the parts, neither in all nor in a certain one. Here is the crux of the argument. For if the whole should be in some of the parts, the greater would be in the lesser, which is impossible. But since the whole is neither in many nor in one, nor in all the parts, is it not necessary that it should either be in some other, or that it should be nowhere? It is necessary. But if it is nowhere, will it not be nothing? And if it is a whole, since it is not in itself, is it not necessary that it should be in another? Entirely so. So far, therefore, as the one is a whole, it is in another. But so far as all things are in its parts, and itself, all the parts, it is in itself. And so the one will necessarily be in itself and in another, necessarily. Now let's turn to Proclus to see what significance he sees in the one being both in itself and in another. He shows that it is the nature of intellects to flow from their priors. They then revert to that prior, and in doing so, know their cause. Every imparticipable intellect is said to be the intellect of the natures prior to itself. And towards them, from whom it is produced, it has an intellectual reversion, and in them as first effective causes, it establishes itself. The intelligible monads each serve as transcendent monads of the worlds that follow them. As discussed above, the intelligible intellectual world is marked by wholeness and by the infinite power of procession. Intelligible whole, then, functions as the transcendent monad at the head of the intelligible intellectual world. Here in the intellectual world, we see that all is marked by the intellectual act of reverting to its cause, thereby knowing itself. Intelligible intellect, then, is the monad that transcendently rules over this world. This dynamic within the intellectual world can be expressed through Greek mythology. Kronos is the father of Zeus, the intellectual god known as the Demiurgus, who unfolds the physical universe. Kronos, then, is an intellect prior to Zeus. Metaphysically, he is the hyparxis or summit of the intellectual world. Yet, simultaneously, he also reverts to his intelligible cause, that of intelligible intellect. The first father of the gods in this order, Kronos, at one and the same time is allotted a paternal transcendency with respect to those posterior to him, and is the intellect of the first intelligibles. In other words, he is associated with both the summit of the intellectual world and also the third of the triad of intelligibles. So here's a little diagram to show that. What this means in terms of the dialogue Parmenides is that Kronos is in himself in regards to being the summit of his own intellectual world. Yet, simultaneously, he is in another in the sense that he reverts to his cause and establishes himself in intelligible intellect. So far indeed as he is a total intellect, his energy is directed to himself. But so far as he is in the intelligibles prior to himself, he establishes in another the all-perfect intelligence of himself. Proclus further clarifies that for Kronos, being in another means being in his prior. Therefore, it is superior to being in himself. For indeed, this subsistence in another is more excellent than the subsistence of a thing in itself, since, as Parmenides himself concludes, the subsistence of Kronos in another pertains to him according to whole, but the subsistence of him in himself according to parts. In itself and in another, then, refers to the one as the summit of the intellectual world. And now we come to the second intellectual triad, and whereas the first triad was Kronos, the middle triad here is his wife and sister, Rhea. From here, Parmenides goes on to talk about the one as moved and standing still. Back in the first hypothesis, Parmenides had to show that the one neither moved nor was at rest. Now, what he has to do is show that the one of the second hypothesis is both moved and at rest. But as the one is naturally such, is it not necessary that it should both be moved and stand still? The words "as such" show us that Parmenides is continuing to build on what has been agreed thus far. This brings us to the second intellectual triad. As the middle of the intellectual world, this triad flows from the middle genera of wholes and is analogous to intelligible life. Being the life, though, of the third divine world, it is life by participation. Therefore, it is not motion, but rather that which is moved. Since, therefore, life is surveyed in a threefold respect, in intelligibles indeed according to cause, but in intelligibles and intellectuals according to hyparxis, and in intellectuals according to participation, it is indeed necessary that the life which is in the intellectual order should both be life and participate of the causes generative of life prior to itself. The one, therefore, of the intellectual gods which is arranged in the middle is not motion, but that which is moved. We see in Parmenides that Parmenides connects being moved and standing still with being in itself and in another. It must stand still indeed if it be in itself, for being in one and not departing from this will be in same through being in itself. But that which is always in the same must necessarily, without doubt, always stand still. In all metaphysical triads of the realms of reality, the middles represent progression and prolific life. As discussed above, mythologists generally symbolize these middles with goddesses. The middle triad of the intellectual world is said to be Rhea, the wife and sister of the great Kronos. She is tied to the guardian goddess Athena, and through this connection she is firmly established in herself. This allows her to function as a fountain of intellectual life in motion. Being established in herself, then, means that she stands still. Guardian gods and goddesses such as Athena represent the transcendent aspect of the gods. As Proclus presents this theology, each series is headed by a transcendent god who then functions as cause to its participable counterpart. These transcendent gods, though, create without motion. Their creative act is often described as an overflowing from their very being. Kronos, for example, is transcendent by reverting to his intelligible cause, and so being established in another. Yet, as the head of the intellectual world, he is in himself, and so is said to be a participable intellect unfolding the whole intellectual series. Rhea, likewise, is both transcendent and participable. As transcendent, she is established in the guardian gods. From that station, she creates through her very being, without motion. However, in her function as a fountain, she is established in her priors, and so is moved and is overflowing. She is in another. But what? Must not that, on the contrary, which is always in another, necessarily never be in same? But if it be never in same, can it stand still? And if it does not stand still, must it not be moved? Proclus explains. With respect, therefore, to motion here and permanency, the former indeed is the fountain of the life and generative power that proceeds to all things, but the latter establishes the whole vivific fountain in itself, but is from thence filled with the prolific rivers of life. Parmenides, therefore, delivering to us these things and the progression of them, demonstrates that which is moved is generated from that which is in another, but that which stands still from that which is in itself. And so, by declaring pairs of opposites to both be true for the one that is, Parmenides is able to acknowledge the complex metaphysical concept of principles being both transcendent and immanent, simultaneously the fullest flowering of its series, while also being the cause of that series, separate and beyond it. And this brings us to the third intellectual triad. And as we have Kronos and Rhea in the two positions above, now we see their son Zeus at the extremity of this triad. Parmenides is in part able to unfold the complex dynamics mythologized by Rhea through the use of same in his reasoning. By bringing in same, he has now opened the door to difference. He introduces this leg of the argument in this way. But likewise, it ought to be the same with itself and different from itself, and in like manner, the same with and different from others, if it suffers what we have related above. In order to unfold his argument, Parmenides needs to introduce a metaphysical principle. Everything in a certain respect thus takes place with relation to everything. For it is either the same with it or different. Or if it is neither same nor different, it will be a part of this to which it is so related, or with respect to a part, it will be a whole. It is helpful to remember that Parmenides here is talking about the second hypothesis. So this is at the level of opposites, comparisons, and analogies. What he's saying here is that in the realms of reality, there are only two relationships, same and different, and part and whole. In Parmenides, this principle is accepted without further clarification. Proclus, however, gives us this in his Elements of Theology. Proposition 66. All beings with reference to each other are either wholes or parts, or the same or different. For either some of them comprehend, but the rest are comprehended, or they neither comprehend nor are comprehended. And they either suffer something which is the same, as participating of one thing, or they are separated from each other. But if they comprehend, they will be wholes, and if they are comprehended, parts. If also many things participate of one thing, they are the same according to this one. But if they are alone many things, so far as they are many, they will be different from each other. Parmenides can now use these two possible relationships. He has to show four different things: that the one is the same with itself, that it is the same with others, and also that the one is both different from itself and also different from others. As we descend into differentiation from the unity of more ancient realms, separations become more pronounced, represented in Parmenides by the number of proofs being doubled to 4 instead of a single pair of opposites. The number of conclusions in this part of the Parmenides is doubled, for the one is no longer demonstrated to be alone same or different, as it is to be in itself and in another, or to be moved and stand still. But it is demonstrated to be the same with itself and different from itself, and to be different from other things, and the same with other things. Proclus shows this third order of intellectuals both triadically and monadically. As a triad, it is analogous to bound infinity and the mixed. Monadically, this is the demiurgus, which encapsulates the essence, power, and activity of the whole order. It is the demiurgus of wholes who unfolds the realm of soul and the gods of the physical world. Recall that he reverts to his father Kronos and his grandfather Uranus in order to do this. And the footnote points you to the chapter on the first hypothesis. This function as the demiurgus of wholes, Proclus argues, is represented by Parmenides in this section of the second hypothesis on same indifferent. As we've seen with the other fathers in the intellectual world, and the footnote, by the way, is pointing out that Rhea is considered to be a father, even though she is a goddess rather than a male god. The term father refers to the transcendent aspect of these gods. So going back to the text, as we've seen with the other fathers in the intellectual world, the demiurgus has both a transcendent and an immanent aspect. The demiurgus, as being immanent in himself and truly what he is the same with himself. The one is said to be the same with itself, for the another is in the demiurgus according to the transcendency of different causes. But the same appears to be a sign of his proper, namely of his paternal, hyparxis. For being one and the exempt father and demiurgus of wholes, he establishes his proper union in himself. And in this one, Parmenides in a remarkable manner shows the uniform in that which is allied to bound. Parmenides unfolds the argument following a different reasoning, falling back on the two possible relationships of part to whole and same to different. Is therefore the one a part of itself? By no means. It will not therefore be a whole with respect to itself, as if itself were a part, for it cannot. But is the one therefore different from the one? By no means. It will not therefore be different from itself, certainly not. If therefore it is neither different, nor a whole, nor yet a part with respect to itself, is it not necessary that it should be the same with itself? It is necessary. With this, Parmenides has established that the one is the same with itself. Yet he also has to show that the one is different from itself. He uses this very conclusion to do it, suggesting that by subsisting in same in itself, it is therefore subsisting in something other than the one, since the same and one are not synonymous. In this regard, the one is different from itself. Through this, therefore, it appears that the one is different from itself. The quickness of moving from the one being the same with itself to it being different from itself highlights the dual functions of immanency and transcendency. As the maker who unfolds subsequent worlds, the demiurgus is immanent in his very essence, and so is the same with himself. Yet, simultaneously, he is the transcendent father of his order. In this regard, he is different from himself. This transcendency is expressed by Proclus through the guardian gods who run parallel to the intellectual gods. These gods are marked by stability and purity, undefiled by the manifestations of the unfolding of reality. These gods, known by various names, guardian gods, undefiled gods, inflexible gods, provide purity and stability to all of the intellectual fathers. The three unpolluted guardians of the intellectual fathers are monadically divided, but together with this division, they have also a hypostasis united to each other. All of them likewise are in a certain respect in each of the fathers, and all of them energize about all. And after a certain manner indeed, according to their proper hypostasis, they are divided from the fathers. But after another manner, they are impartibly assumed with them. And at one and the same time, they are allotted an equally dignified order with the fathers, and appear to possess an essence subordinate to them. Such, therefore, being their nature, they preserve indeed the whole progressions of the fathers undefiled, but supply them with inflexibility in their powers, and immutability in their energies. Inflexibility and immutability are both marks of transcendency. This transcendency requires a purity in the power of these gods, a purity which they providentially unfold to the intellectual fathers. The fathers, in turn, also benefit the undefiled gods through their intellectual activity. And as the intellectual fathers are the suppliers of prolific production, both to all other things and to the inflexible gods, thus also the undefiled gods impart the power of purity, both to the fathers and to the other divine orders. Parmenides expresses this relationship through the same with itself and different from itself. Parmenides' next task is to show the one to be different from other things. This is relatively simple. But are not all such things as are not one different from the one? And is not the one different from such things as are not one? How should it not? The one, therefore, will be different from other things. As the creator of our physical world, the demiurgus is fixed in himself, and so the same with himself. But he is utterly transcendent from his creations. In this regard, then, he is different from other things. Together, however, with prolific abundance and the providential attention to secondary natures, he transcends his progeny and abides in his own accustomed manner, as Timaeus says, through the inflexible guard which subsists with him, and the power imparted to him from it, which is uncontaminated with other participants. These two parallel orders allow us to comprehend the parallel functions of seemingly opposite forces, transcendence and immanence. It is hard for us to wrap our linear thoughts around the harmony of that which seems, at least on the surface, to be incompatible. Such is the peculiarity of the demiurgic order, and Proclus beautifully expresses this harmony by stating, "Being everywhere, they are nowhere. Being present with all things, they are exempt from all things. And being all things, they are not any of their progeny." Parmenides expresses these enigmas by arguing the one to be the same with itself and with others, and also different from itself and with others. He has currently demonstrated 3 of the 4 proofs. All that remains, then, is to show that the one is the same with others. This points to the providential immanence of the one in the unfolding of its progeny. In describing this, Proclus writes, "But the same with other things is the singular good of prolific power, and of a cause proceeding to and pervading through all things without impediment. For the demiurgus is present to all things which he produces, and is in all things the same, which he arranges and adorns, pre-establishing in himself the generative essence of wholes." Parmenides demonstrates this immanency by making use of number. Here is how he sets up his argument. "But neither will things which are not one participate of the one, for if they did, they would no longer be not one, but in a certain respect one." True. Hence, things which are not one will not be number, for they would not be entirely not one in consequence of possessing number. Certainly not. Although casually slipped into the conversation, this point is a significant one. The implication is that without the one, numbers cannot exist. The one is the principle of numbers, It is the condition for numbers to be. This was also introduced back in the discussion of the first intelligible intellectual triad, number. The simplest way to see this is to consider that every number is one number and is made up of units of ones. The number 5, for example, is a single unit of 5 ones. Parmenides is going to use this apparent tangent to show that the one is the same with the others. He does this by showing that the not one cannot have the relationship to the one of parts to whole. This is a reference to the argument we saw a short time ago, stating that the only two relationships possible are part to whole and same to different. He then pulls in the earlier statements from 146 C and D, that the one will be different from other things. The only option remaining of these two pairs of relationships is that the one is the same with others. But what? Can things which are not one be parts of one? Or would not things which are not one by this means participate of the one? They would participate. If, therefore, this is entirely the one, but those not one, nor a whole with respect to them, as if they were parts, nor, on the contrary, will things which are not one be parts of the one, nor yet wholes, as if the one were a part. They will not. But we have said that things which are neither parts nor wholes, nor different from each other, must be the same with each other. We have said so. Must we not therefore assert that the one, since it subsists in this manner with respect to things which are not one, is the same with them? We must. From this, we see that the one of the intellectual order is both stably in itself, as the same with itself, while simultaneously unfolding into number, and thus the same with others. Metaphysically, the same with itself and the same with others can be recognized as this intellectual order being both transcendent and immanent, remaining stably in itself while also proceeding and unfolding progeny. This can be seen in its analogous relationship to the intelligible, bound, and infinity. If, therefore, we rightly assert these things, bound and infinity subsist in him demiurgically, and the one indeed is in the sameness which is separate from other things, but the other is in the power which generates other things. For everywhere power is prolific of secondary natures. But the principle which subsists according to bound is the supplier of a united and stable hypostasis. Wrapping up the 4 proofs, here is Parmenides' conclusion. The one, therefore, as it appears, is both different from others and itself, and the same with them and with itself. From here we will move on to the gods of the realm of soul, and these Proclus calls assimilative gods. Parmenides has now completed the realms that are infinite and eternal. From here, he will reach beyond them to realms that introduce change into the metaphysical framework. It is important to keep in mind here that although we are extending further down the metaphysical hierarchy, we are focused on the gods of each of these worlds. Therefore, our focus in the second hypothesis is still on wholes, and so on that which is eternal within these realms that function in process. With this in mind, the next terms to introduce are the similar and the dissimilar, both to itself and to others. But is it also similar and dissimilar to itself and others? We have now progressed to the realm of soul and to what Proclus calls the assimilative gods, which have the distinction of being the midpoint and connection between the realms that always are and the physical world of flux and change. These gods extend from the demiurgic order. Proclus explains it this way. Since, however, the whole order of the assimilative gods is suspended from the demiurgic monad, subsists about, is converted to, and perfected by it, it is indeed necessary to refer the signs of this order to the demiurgic signs, and to give to the former a well-ordered generation proceeding in measures from the latter. This connection is demonstrated by Parmenides by way of connecting the similar and the dissimilar to the same and the different. Since, therefore, it appears to be different from others, others also will be different from it. But what then? Will it not be different from others in the same manner as others from it, and this neither more nor less? How should it not? If, therefore, neither more nor less, it must be different in a similar manner. Certainly. Similar and dissimilar can be seen as analogous to same and different. However, there is an important distinction. Things that are similar share a likeness, yet they are not the same. There is also difference mixed in. Therefore, the similar and the dissimilar are always coordinate in a way that the same and different are not. This, we will see, is reflected in both Plato's and Proclus's treatment of these terms, and in their connection to the assimilative gods. Proclus writes, "Everything which is assimilative imparts the communication of similitude and of communion with paradigms to all the beings that are assimilated by it. Together with the similar, however, it produces and commingles the dissimilar, since in the images of the similar, the genus of similitude is not naturally adapted to be present, separate from its contrary. If, therefore, this order of gods assimilates sensibles to intellectuals, and produces all things posterior to itself according to an imitation of causes, it is indeed the first effective cause of similitude to natures posterior to itself. But if it is the cause of this, it is also of the dissimilitude which is coordinate with similitude. For it is necessary that all things which participate of the similar should also participate of the dissimilar. Parmenides plays with this coordinate relationship between similar and dissimilar. Will not that through which the one becomes different from others, and others in a similar manner from it, be also that through which both the one becomes the same with others, and others with the one? How do you say? Thus, do not you call every name the name of something? I do, but what then? Do you pronounce the same name often or once? I pronounce it once. When, therefore, you enunciate that name once, do you denominate that thing to which the name belongs, but if often not the same? Or whether you pronounce the same name once or often, do you not necessarily always signify the same thing? But what then? Does not a different name belong to some certain thing? Entirely so. When, therefore, you pronounce this, whether once or often, you do not assign this name to any other, nor do you denominate any other thing than that to which this name belongs. It is necessary it should be so. But when we say that other things are different from the one, and that the one is different from others, twice pronouncing the same different, we yet signify nothing more than the nature of that thing of which this is the name. Entirely so. If, therefore, the one be different from others, and others from the one, in consequence of suffering the same different, the one will not suffer that which is different from others, but the same with others. But is not that which in a certain respect suffers the same similar? Certainly. In other words, the one differs from the others, and the others differ from the one because of difference. Because they differ from one another by the same cause, in this sense, they are similar. With this argument, then, Parmenides has thus far shown the one to be both similar with itself and with others. Now he must show that it is dissimilar both to itself and to others. But in the same manner, as the one becomes different from others, everything becomes similar to everything, for everything is different from all things. It appears so. But is the similar contrary to the dissimilar? It is. And is not different contrary to same? And this also. But this likewise is apparent, that the one is both the same with and different from others. It is apparent. But to be the same with others is a contrary passion to the being different from others. Entirely so. But the one appears to be similar so far as different. Certainly. So far, therefore, as it is same, it will be dissimilar on account of its suffering a passion contrary to that which produces the similar. Or was it not similar which produced the different? Certainly. It will therefore render that which is dissimilar the same, or it would not be contrary to different. So it appears. The one, therefore, will be both similar and dissimilar to others, and so far as different, it will be similar, but so far as the same, dissimilar. The case appears to be so. This argument builds on the previous one, which concluded that the one is similar to others because they share the different. He now reminds Aristotle of the earlier conclusion, that the one is both same and different from others. Therefore, if different renders the one and other similar, then same must render them dissimilar, for it is an opposing passion. At this juncture, these arguments of Parmenides feel like clever plays on words and nothing more. I would argue, though, that actually the functioning of the assimilative gods is being described here. We need to get all the pieces in place first before seeing this clearly. Bear with me just a little bit further. Parmenides has already shown the one to be similar to itself and to others, and he has just argued that it is dissimilar to others. All that is left now is to demonstrate the one to be dissimilar from itself. Parmenides ends this section by further highlighting the interconnectedness of similar and dissimilar. So far as it suffers same, it does not suffer that which is various. But not suffering that which is various, it cannot be dissimilar. And not being dissimilar, it will be similar. But so far as it suffers different, it will be various. And being various, it will be dissimilar. You speak the truth. Since, therefore, the one is both the same with and different from others, according to both and according to each of these, it will be similar and dissimilar to others. Entirely so. And will not this, in a similar manner, be the case with relation to itself? since it has appeared to be both different from and the same with itself, so that, according to both these and according to each, it will appear to be similar and dissimilar, necessarily so. This final argument, by clarifying that the one is sometimes unified and at other times various, points to the unfolding of reality from unity to differentiation. That which is closer to its principle enjoys unity, and so likewise a greater share of the similar. As the series unfolds, the dissimilar plays a more prominent role. Proclus expresses this through the god's functions of abiding in its unity at its summit, and then proceeding into prolific power. And this order of gods indeed imparts the similar in a greater degree than the dissimilar to the progeny that are more proximate to their principles. But it constitutes the essence of things that proceed farther from their principles, according to dissimilitude rather than similitude. With greater dissimilitude, differentiation increases as the series unfolds. The functions of abiding and proceeding are actually 2/3 of a triad. The third function in this triad is, of course, returning to its cause. As proceeding, the assimilative gods carry unity into differentiation. Returning is the anagogic function of assimilating souls whose energies had been diffused by the diverse energies of the physical realm back to their proper unity. For, in short, similitude will have in itself a hypostasis analogous to the paternal causes, and to the causes which convert to principles. But the hypostasis of dissimilitude is analogous to prolific causes, and to those that preside over multitude and division. For similitude indeed proceeds analogous to intelligible bound, but dissimilitude to intelligible infinity. The similar and the dissimilar, then, are the distinction of the assimilative gods. These are the gods of the psychical realm, or the realm of soul. Their function is to communicate the similitude of divine paradigms into the physical world, and to connect the lower realms to divine goodness. They are the bridge between the divine and the mundane. As such, they play a connective role. Proclus explains it in this way. For the genus of the ruling gods is similar and dissimilar to itself and to other things. But being dissimilar and dissimilar to itself, it conjoins itself to and separates itself from its principles, preserving the proper boundaries of progression. That, however, which is similar and dissimilar to other things, converts and congregates other things to itself and separates them from itself. I do, by the way, want to point out the footnote about the ruling gods. And this reads, there are various distinctions Proclus makes in his very detailed treatment of the psychical realm. Assimilative is a general term used to refer to all of the gods in this realm. The ruling gods rank highest among the assimilative gods. And going back to the text now, elsewhere, Plato tells us that it is through the intermediate powers of the realm of soul that all communication occurs between humans and intelligible gods. Here is a quote from Banquet or Symposium, in which Socrates is talking with his teacher Diotima about the assimilative powers of daimons. What is the power and virtue of this intermediate kind of being? To transmit and to interpret to the gods what comes from men, and to men in like manner what comes from the gods. From men, their petitions and their sacrifices. From the gods, in return, the revelation of their will. Thus these beings, standing in the middle rank between divine and human, fill up the vacant space and link together all intelligent nature. For divinity is not mingled with man, but by means of that middle nature is carried on all converse and communication between the gods and mortals, whether in sleeping or waking. The assimilative rank of gods and daimons, then, carry on an anagogic function that is vital to all humans, and which is especially meaningful to those of us seeking to know thyself. Parmenides expresses this through his treatment in the second hypothesis of the similar and the dissimilar. And now we have reached the liberated gods, and these are the gods of the realm of nature. It is at this point in the dialogue that Parmenides brings in a term that we did not see in the first hypothesis. But consider now how the one subsists with respect to touching itself and others, and not touching. As reality extends even further out from the unity of the intelligible world, the gods energize not only towards themselves and their causes, but also towards their prodigy. Touching and not touching, then, relates to the super-celestial gods known as the liberated order. They are co-arranged with the mundane world, yet transcend those over which they administer. They therefore touch other things in the sense of being immanent in the mundane world. Simultaneously, though, they are also separate and unaffected by the offspring they touch. Proclus writes, "For to touch is an indication of alliance with us and of a co-arranged providence. But again, not to touch is an indication of a transcendency exempt and separate from mundane natures." In addition to touching and not touching others, the one of the liberated order also touches and does not touch itself. Proclus writes, "For if it has proceeded from its principles, and if it energizes partably, it is various and multiform. For every progression diminishes indeed the powers of the proceeding natures, but increases the multitude which is in them. And if it has not entirely proceeded, the uniform nature of its essence shines forth to the view at one and the same time with the multitude it contains. This genus of gods, therefore, is co-arranged with the mundane gods and transcends the subjects of its government. It is also liberated, being separated from things which are perfectly divided. Hence, if it is one and multitude, producing indeed into secondary natures the many rivers of the fountains, but surpassing partible allotments, it will at one and the same time touch and not touch itself. Proclus recognizes that this liberated order, by being marked by both immanence and transcendence, is also both unified and differentiated, one and many. This too is indicated by both touching and not touching. If it is one and multitude, producing indeed into secondary natures the many rivers of the fountains, but surpassing partible allotments, it will at one and the same time touch and not touch itself. On account of its separate union indeed, it is not in want of contact, but on account of its progression into multitude, it touches itself. Turning now to Parmenides, Plato demonstrates the one touching both itself and touching others. The one appears in a certain respect to be in the whole of itself. Right. But is the one also in others? Certainly. So far, therefore, as the one is in others, it will touch others. But so far as it is in itself, it will be hindered from touching others. But it will touch itself because it subsists in itself. So it appears. And thus, indeed, the one will both touch itself and others. Being in itself, then, is a description of the transcendent nature of the liberated gods. Being in others, in contrast, describes their immanent connection with the energies of the mundane world. From here, Parmenides goes on to demonstrate the one neither touching itself nor others. He starts with an argument as to why the one cannot touch itself. Must not everything which is about to touch anything be situated in a place proximate to and after that which it is about to touch, and in which, when situated, it touches? It is necessary. The one, therefore, if it is about to touch itself, ought to be situated immediately after itself, occupying the place proximate to that in which it is. It ought so. Would not this be the case with the one if it was two? And would it not be in two places at once? But can this be the case while it is the one? It cannot. The same necessity, therefore, belongs to the one, neither to be two nor to touch itself. This same line of reasoning, Plato shows us, allows Parmenides to also conclude that the one does not touch others either. Two things, therefore, at the least, are requisite if contact is about to take place. Certainly. But if a third thing succeeds to the two terms, these will now be three, but the contacts two. Certainly. And thus, one always being added, one contact will be added, and it will come to pass that the contacts will be less by one than the multitude of the numbers. For by how much the two first numbers surpassed the contacts, so as to be more in number than the contacts, by so much will all the following numbers surpass the multitude of the contacts. For in that which remains, one will be added to the number, and one contact to the contacts. Right. The contacts, therefore, less by one, will always be as many in number as the things themselves. True. If, therefore, it is one alone and not two, there can be no contact. How can there be? Parmenides then concludes the argument thus. The one, therefore, will neither touch other things, nor will other things touch the one, as there is no contact. Certainly not. On all these accounts, therefore, the one will both touch and not touch others and itself. So it appears. And now at this point we have reached the realm of materiality, and these gods Proclus calls Encosmic gods. Continuing to unfold the realms of reality, the next set of terms on the list are equal and not equal. Is it therefore equal and unequal to itself and others? To demonstrate this double set of pairs, Parmenides makes use of absolute realities or things in themselves. Are there not two certain species of this kind, magnitude and smallness? For if they had no subsistence, they could never be contrary to each other, and be present with beings. Parmenides is clarifying here that he is referring to magnitude and smallness in the absolute sense. He is not interested in size in our physical world, but rather among the absolute realities. The absolute realities have true subsistence, whereas things in the physical realm have a mode of reality, but are in constant flux, coming into existence and passing out of it. But indeed, magnitude itself will not surpass anything else but smallness itself, nor will smallness be less than any other than magnitude itself. To talk of equal or unequal implies referencing measure. The one that is, however, being beyond all measure, and indeed being the cause of measure, cannot be compared in any way with the equal or the unequal. Nor will these two possess any power with respect to the one, either of surpassing or of being surpassed. But this will be the case only with respect to each other. Nor, on the contrary, will the one be either greater or lesser than these two, or others, as it neither possesses magnitude nor smallness. So indeed it appears. If the one, therefore, is neither greater nor lesser than others, is it not necessary that it should neither surpass nor be surpassed by them? It is necessary. Is it not also abundantly necessary that that which neither surpasses nor is surpassed should be equally affected? And must it not, if equally affected, be equal? How should it not? The one, therefore, will be thus circumstanced with respect to itself, from neither possessing magnitude nor smallness in itself. It will neither surpass nor be surpassed by itself, but being equally affected, it will be equal to itself. Entirely so. The one, therefore, will be equal both to itself and others. And now, right after making that argument, Parmenides is going to turn the whole argument on its head. But if the one should be in itself, it would also be externally about itself, and so, through comprehending itself, it would be greater than itself, but from being comprehended, less than itself. And thus the one would be both greater and lesser than itself. It is difficult at first blush to recognize the metaphysical significance of arguing for the one to be both greater and lesser than itself, especially right after declaring it to be equal both to itself and to others. This will become easier to see once we unravel the relationship between the one and others. To commence this leg of the argument, Parmenides returns to the notion of true subsistence, as opposed to that which comes into and goes out of existence. Is not this also necessary, that nothing has any subsistence besides the one and others? Plato is reminding the reader here that the others he is referring to are absolute realities. The second hypothesis, although demonstrating the unfolding of all the realms, focuses on the gods and therefore on that which truly is. Once it is determined that there are things which truly exist, he can put them in place. Some readers may perhaps take issue with this argument. After all, these absolute realities are not physical things that fluctuate in this realm of time and space. That is the very distinction Parmenides just made. So why can he say that they must be somewhere? The meaning here is not that they are in some physical place. Rather, each of the absolute realities is in its own proper realm and its own proper rank within its realm. There is an order that runs through all, and this is in part the very intelligibility of reality. While it is true that this ordering runs through all realms, it is the special peculiarity of the mundane gods. I will again turn to Proclus to clarify this point. Proclus's theology of Plato as it currently exists consists of only 6 books, ending with the liberated order of gods. The translator Thomas Taylor postulated that a 7th book must have existed but has since been lost. He therefore compiled sections from other works of Proclus's, so as to piece together this great philosopher's views of the mundane gods. Instead, therefore, of being able to present Proclus's commentary on this section of the second hypothesis, Taylor translated for us a section on the equal and unequal in the first hypothesis. This comes from Proclus's commentary on Plato's Parmenides. The peculiarity of the mundane gods is the equal and the unequal, the former of these indicating their fullness, and their receiving neither any addition nor ablation, for such is that which is equal to itself, always preserving the same boundary. But the latter, the multitude of their powers, and the excess and defect which they contain. For in these, divisions, variety of powers, differences of progressions, analogies, and bonds, through these are, according to ancient theologists, especially allotted a place. You can see there that came out of the theology of Plato, but it was taken from the commentary on Plato's Parmenides at the section 1202. Proclus explains further in this commentary on Plato's Parmenides that the equal applies to the head of the mundane series, the unequal to the lower portion of it. He writes that the Encosmic gods, to which this terminology of equal and unequal is proper, in its upper extremity and at its summits is unified, while at its lower extent and in its processive aspect is divided. And in proceeding to the most individualized levels, it goes from the same measures to the many and the few, at which point the unmeasured, being overcome by equality, turns back and reverts to its beginning. For all inequality among them is dominated in every aspect by equality. It is certainly easier to see this with the others, as they are subsequent to the one and so proceed from it. Proclus's reasoning, though, also applies to the one being greater and lesser than itself. However, seeing this requires recognizing the one unfolding with its progeny. Plato addresses this convoluted unfolding, the progression of the dyadic one being, the dyad of the one in being, here denoted as other in Parmenides. But ought not whatever has a being to be always somewhere? Certainly. And does not that which subsists in another subsist as the lesser in the greater? For one thing cannot in any other way subsist in another. It cannot. But since there is nothing else except the one and others, and it is necessary that these should be in something, is it not necessary that they should be in one another, namely others in the one and the one in others, or that they should be nowhere? It appears so. Because, therefore, the one is in others, others will be greater than the one through comprehending it. But the one will be less than others because comprehended. But if others are inherent in the one on the same account will be greater than others, but others will be less than the one. It appears so. The one, therefore, is equal to, greater and less, both than itself and others. It seems so. But if it is greater, equal, and lesser, it will be of equal, more, and fewer measures, both than itself and others, and if of measures, also of parts. It is also worth remembering here that the intelligible one being was shown to be the parts of the self that is. Plato, therefore, through the unfolding of the one with its progeny, is showing us that the whole divine unfolding of the gods, ultimately, is self. And now at last we have extended far enough down through the realms so as to reach time. Will the one, therefore, participate of time? And is it, and does it subsist in becoming to be younger and older, both than itself and others? And again, neither younger nor older than itself and others, though participating of time? We have to ask ourselves which order in the divine unfolding of the gods is marked by time. With this inquiry, a puzzle immediately presents itself. If the second hypothesis only focuses on the gods, why is time even here? Aren't things subject to time in the realm of becoming? Proclus answers this puzzle by suggesting that this section of the text applies to divine souls. Unlike intelligibles which are in eternity, these souls are in time. However, they are divinized through their participation in the gods, and so move through the whole of time. He explains, "It is to these that the most primal time properly refers, not that which has proceeded into the visible realm, but that which is absolute and non-relative, according to which are measured all the circuits of souls, and their dances and encirclings around the intelligible." In other words, he is focused on the most primal time, or time itself, time as a whole. This supports Plato's presentation of time in Parmenides. Parmenides opens the argument by stating clearly that when he talks of the one, he is referring to a one that has being. To be, in a certain respect, is present with it, since it is the one. Certainly. But what else is to be than a participation of essence with the present time? In the same manner as it was, is a communication of essence with the past, and it will be with the future. It is no other. It must participate, therefore, of time, if it participates of being. The English word essence here is the Greek word ousia, which is that activity which is the mark of all that truly is. It is the power to turn about so as to know oneself. While this power itself is outside of time, the journey of divine souls and their connection with their causes puts Parmenides' second hypothesis, one, in constant communion with time. Recognizing this helps us better understand Parmenides' treatment of the one experiencing both younger and older, as well as of the same age. All three of these apply to divine souls in their motion through time. Proclus states of time, "It takes its beginning from above, imitating that eternity which comprehends all things and holds together all motion, whether it be psychic or vital, or however it be said to arise. and it unfolds it and brings it to completion. And it is itself in essence an intellect, while acting as cause for divine souls of their dance and of their infinite motion around the intelligible, and by means of which there also arises that in them which is older and younger and of the same age. In this quote here, we see Proclus calls time an intellect that therefore undergoes all that intellectual real beings experience. It abides in itself and so comprehends all that it holds. It proceeds outward, thus unfolding the logos of itself. It then reverts to itself so as to know itself, which is the mark of an intellect. In that act of reversion, it gives birth to what Proclus calls the dance enjoyed by divine souls. This will become clearer as we see how Plato's Parmenides unfolds this argument. Must it not, therefore, participate of time in progression? Certainly. It will always, therefore, subsist in becoming to be older than itself, if it proceeds according to time. It is necessary. And so here we are seeing Parmenides set up time as a medium between eternity and time in what appears to be partial as we experience it. Unlike eternity, time does not remain a simultaneous whole. Rather, it is what we would call perpetual. It is a whole that perpetually unfolds. Do we therefore call to mind that the older is always becoming older because it is always becoming younger? We do call it to mind. Parmenides is, of course, referencing the discussion about time in the first hypothesis, and the footnote sends you back to 140e. There we saw time moving in a circular fashion. The end of one cycle marks the beginning of the next. The end is therefore also the beginning. This allows Parmenides to conclude that what is becoming older is also becoming younger. But is it not then older when it subsists in becoming to be according to the present time, which is between it was and it will be? For through proceeding from the past to the future, it will not pass beyond the present now? It will not. Will it not, therefore, cease becoming to be older when it arrives at the now, and is no longer becoming to be, but is now older? For while it proceeds, it will never be comprehended by the now. For that which proceeds subsists in such a manner as to touch upon both the now and the future time, departing indeed from the now, but apprehending the future, because it subsists in the middle of the future and the now. True. But if it be necessary that whatever is becoming to be should not pass by the now or the present time, hence, as soon as it arrives at the now, it will always cease becoming to be, and is then that which it was in pursuit of becoming. It appears so. The one, therefore, when in becoming older it arrives at the now, will cease becoming to be, and then is older. Entirely so. Is it not, therefore, older than that in respect of which it becomes older? And does it not become older than itself? Certainly. And is not the older older than the younger? It is. The one, therefore, is younger than itself, when in becoming older it arrives at the now. It is necessary. This again evokes the arguments in the first hypothesis which on the surface may seem like clever wordplay. However, I would argue that Plato is pointing us towards the circular cycles of divine souls. Yet, slipped into the middle of this demonstration of the circular, he also gave us an image of the perpetual now. This is clarified in the lines that follow. But the now is always present with the one, through the whole of its being, for it is always now, as long as it is. How should it not? The one, therefore, always is and is becoming to be younger and older than itself. So it appears. And so with this, Parmenides has beautifully presented time as a perpetual whole with simultaneous parts. Any given moment is simultaneously past, present, and future. And it is always now. Parmenides uses this reasoning to add that while the one is both younger and older than itself, it can also be said to be neither older nor younger, but rather equal to itself. This follows from the now being ever present with the one. From here, Parmenides has to show that the one is younger, older, and equal in age to the others. This section, I suggest, is much easier to grasp if we recognize what metaphysical truth Parmenides is pointing to with these arguments. Parmenides opens this leg of the discussion by pointing to the others as being a multiplicity. As a multiplicity, they must follow the one because simplicity always precedes multiplicity. Unity is always prior to differentiation. Do we say that things more in number are generated or have been generated before the few? We assert this of the few before the many. That which is the fewest, therefore, is first, but is not this the one? The one, being prior in subsistence to the others, is said to be older than them. This is a poetical use of the terms older and younger, as the unfolding of reality is outside of time. This way of writing is nothing new to the Greeks. Metaphysical hierarchies are often symbolized in mythology in terms of time, such as Kronos being the father of Zeus. This lineage signifies that Kronos, as the summit of the intellectual world, is metaphysically prior to Zeus, who is the intellect that unfolds and oversees the physical universe. And so, after unfolding the one through multiple realms of reality, Parmenides is now pulling it all together. The one as the one being is older than the multiplicity of real beings that follow in its series. But that which is first generated has, I think, a priority of subsistence, but others are posterior to this. But such as have an after generation are younger than that which had a prior generation, and thus others will be younger than the one, but the one will be older than others. After reiterating this basic hierarchical structure, Parmenides now has to argue that the one is younger than the others. What is the value of that? We will see by the end of this argument an image in words of the one flowing through all the real beings, from the beginning of the chain to the end. He then sets up the chain in the previous conclusion, and now will place the one at each point within that chain. This is reminiscent of what he did with equal and unequal. He begins this line of reasoning by reminding us that the one of the second hypothesis has parts. But the one appears to consist of parts, and if of parts, it possesses a beginning, end, and middle. Certainly. Is not therefore the beginning generated first of all, both of the one and of every other thing, and after the beginning all the other parts as far as to the end? What then? And indeed, we should say that all these are parts of a whole and of one, but that the one, together with the end, is generated one and a whole. In this first step, Parmenides gives us the picture of the one that is both a whole and parts. This takes us back to the opening of the second hypothesis, where he presented the one being, while simultaneously tying into it all that unfolded after. The whole being referred to here is not specifically the one being. The one being is the whole prior to its unfolding. We now are looking at the whole as the whole of reality, all of the realms that have been articulated for us throughout this hypothesis. But the end, I think, must be generated last of all, and the one must be naturally generated together with this, so that the one, since it is necessary that it should not be generated contrary to nature, being produced together with the end, will be naturally generated the last of others. The one, therefore, is younger than others, but others are older than the one. What I see Parmenides hitting home with this conclusion is the insight that the one unfolds throughout all the orders of gods. The one is present with all being throughout the series. In this regard, it can be said to be younger than the others. This flow of reality, though, with the one never absent from its creations, can be shown even more clearly than this. Parmenides picks up this demonstration next, by showing that being constantly with its creations, the others, means that the one is neither older nor younger than them. But what? Must not the beginning, or any other part whatever, of the one, or of anything else, if it is a part, and not parts, must it not necessarily be one, since it is a part? Necessarily. The one, therefore, while becoming to be, together with the first part, will be generated, and together with the second, and it will never desert any one of the other generated parts, till arriving at the extremity it becomes one whole, neither excluded from the middle nor from the last, nor the first, nor from any other whatever in its generation. True. The one, therefore, will possess the same age with others, as, if it be not the one contrary to its own nature, it will be generated neither prior nor posterior to the others, but together with them. And on this account the one will neither be older nor younger than others, nor others than the one. But according to the former reasoning, the one was both older and younger than others, and others in a similar manner than it. On first blush, these arguments with conflicting conclusions appear to be clever sophistry. One can even be forgiven for concluding that the point is to show the limits of logical reasoning. I would argue, however, that the key to unraveling the terse argumentation is to see what metaphysical insight is being pointed to in each case. Through these three seemingly contradictory arguments, Parmenides has illustrated the unfolding of reality from the one being down to the beings overseeing the realm of materiality. And he has shown us that the one is never absent from any aspect of reality. The arguments that follow again give a convoluted account of the circular nature of time, moving now from being to becoming. This completes the range of others to be considered in relation to the one. Parmenides is thus able to conclude, on all these accounts, therefore, the one is and is becoming to be, older and younger, both than itself and others. And again, neither is nor is becoming to be older nor younger than itself and others. Parmenides then ends this hypothesis by affirming all that he had denied of the first hypothesis. There will therefore be knowledge, opinion, and sense of the one, since we have now treated of all these things about it. You speak rightly. A name, therefore, and discourse may subsist about the one, and it may be denominated and spoken of, and whatever particulars of the same kind take place in other things will also take place about the one. The case is perfectly so. The first two instances of the one in the passage above are actually the self, and so it is the self, or the self that is, that we have now determined there to be knowledge, opinion, and perception of, that we can name and discourse about. This one self differs from that of the first hypothesis, for here the self is qualified by the one that is. Therefore, this self is all. It is the one being and all that flows from it. With these words, Plato wraps up the second hypothesis. Parmenides has described the flow of the one from one being through divine souls that perfect in time. As we see in the quote above, we can climb to this vision from sense perception up through opinion and ultimately by way of knowledge. We can name and speak of this self that is. It is more than a discourse, actually, for the Greek word there is logos. Parmenides is telling us that we must follow the logos back to the one, and ultimately to the one self of the first hypothesis. This is a contemplation, one that brings us to a vision of the self that is as a complete whole that is balanced and just throughout, every part playing its proper role in the eternal play of divine beauty. We have yet to see, however, the interplay between these divine realities and the energy of individual souls functioning here in the realm of becoming. True being is only in the realm of wholes. As we journey into identity with parts, we journey into images of the real and the realms of becoming. Becoming was briefly mentioned at the end of this hypothesis, but it becomes the focus of the third hypothesis. It is there that Parmenides explores more fully the providential role that the divine plays in the journey of individual souls as we navigate a physical incarnation. Okay, so we'll stop it there for today. Again, please let me know in the comments section if you found this explanation clear, if there's anything that would have been helpful to make it clear for you. I would really appreciate knowing that. And I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you will join me in the next video where I go through the third hypothesis. Till then, so long.